Lovable's getting loads of traction, and Shopify have the option of watching someone like Stripe take payments income and Lovable build more capability for commerce, or they can take that payment income and build brand awareness as part of it. So for me, I feel like that's the goal behind that. This could give them the infrastructure to collect more signals and data, which could be super valuable from an advertising perspective.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-com strategy, technology and CX focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialist James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-com strategy of leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This episode is sponsored by Shopify, and we're actually going to focus in on the Shopify ecosystem today for one very good reason. There's been a lot of activity in the Shopify space this year, and Shopify is consolidating itself as a market leader. Latest consultancy reports have come out showing they're rated higher for execution and vision this year. Take consultancy reports with a slight pinch of salt. However, what's clear is that there is a general strategic direction in the industry, and Shopify is shaping and influencing that quite strongly. And what we want to look at is what are the key developments in Shopify strategy and product, and what does that mean? What are the indications? Where do we think the direction of travel generally is? And this will link into a wider state of the industry pod that will run pre-Christmas, and we'll release in a few weeks' time. That's my rambling intro. Paul, anything to add in terms of what we're going to jabber on about today?
No, I don't think so. The only thing that I was thinking when you said about it is at some point maybe we should do an episode more focused on our opinion on the Magic Quadrant, because I feel like it's probably a good episode just looking at the movements and kind of discussing some of the vendors.
That'll be a big discussion. Yes, we could potentially do one. Let's park that one because that involves lots of different sub-threads.
Yeah.
So again, this is quite good. We do these like head to heads, and we end up coming up with loads more ideas for episodes. So anyway, let's go through some of the key strategic drops, and then let's do the so what basically, and not just it's a new feature, isn't it great? We can use it, but it's more about what it indicates and what merchants can expect going forward. So I think the big one, and it's the theme of the year, is big tech companies going big on AI and re-architecting products around AI capabilities to increase automation, to increase self-serve, and what this means to merchants and where they can evolve with the platform, and also what it means to the wider ecosystem in terms of other tech vendors, third parties, the tools that people are used to using, what they need to use, don't need to use going forward. And the big one was the Atlas AI store builder and the Lovable announcement. So, big suite of tools for not just about, generative AI for like building out content capabilities within stores, but wider into the ability to like vibe code and to build stores without developer support or without so much developer support. Big caveat on that, because if you're not a technical person, building code and not being able to do any due diligence on it is not necessarily a smart way to go forwards. So that's the big change. What where your head's at in terms of what this means and the conversations you're having with people and how others are seeing it?
I think I got three separate views around this. I think Lovable piece is a smart move. I think people like in the industry on LinkedIn, there's been some really big views around kind of where this could go and could this kill agencies and everything else. I personally see it as like Lovable's getting shed loads of traction, and Shopify have got the option of watching someone like Stripe take all of that payments income and Lovable build more capability for commerce, or they can go and agree something and take that payment income and build a lot of brand awareness as part of it. So for me, I feel like that's kind of the goal behind that. I don't think that will be the thing that changes the industry personally. I think it will just be a route to market for a certain type of user. And I think it's probably a bit of a competitive move as well, personally, and obviously a market move as well. So that's kind of how I see the Lovable one. I think the more interesting one is the Atlas AI piece. So I think I, again, personally feel like one of the big strands to Shopify will be the first party data strategy and the ad network strategy. And I feel like at the minute, if you look at the front end of sites, a lot of what's happening are within third party client side JavaScript, like the search experience, the product recommendations and the product grid. And actually, Shopify is not providing the infrastructure for that. They're essentially just passing in catalog data. And I think this could give them the infrastructure to collect a shitload more signals and data, which could be super valuable from an advertising perspective. Also will help them from an AI perspective in terms of understanding more around the customer, and then also help them with kind of automating things. So again, just having a lot more kind of signals to drive the value of the AI stuff. Because realistically, where we're kind of heading is that a lot of the agentic stuff will be like kind of delivered, or like a lot of those kind of manual merchandising tasks will be automated. And I think Shopify need to own more of that data in order to drive that. And then I think the final thing is, I feel like a lot of people are predicting that there'll be like almost two types of experience for like owned website navigation, and one will be the existing kind of catalog experience, and one will be more of a guided experience. And I feel like, again, in order to have the infrastructure for the second one, they need to own more of that. So for me, that feels like more of a data move than kind of just trying to improve capability. And I feel like we'll start to see a lot more from Shopify around kind of, optimizing storefronts in different ways, being able to automate more within the admin. And then also at some point, they'll really push the advertising side.
So I'm intrigued by the point you made about the payments bit and Stripe, because obviously Shopify's own payments thing's built off Stripe. Stripe is a competitor. But equally, payment engines like PayPal are big competitors. PayPal offering its payment capabilities on ads, etc. All these ways of speeding up the payment outside of websites. So I'm intrigued to expand on that, how you think this move is going to benefit them then in terms of that consolidation of their or protection against people going. Is it you see this as, well, actually, if we make it easier for people to embed shoppable and payable experiences without the effort of building out sites in a traditional way, you think that's going to help them attract additional sites or users rather than people then going down through other routes?
Well, I think, the way that I look at it is if people are, and like I've watched Joho from our team, build some pretty significant, web applications in Lovable. And I guess as people kind of build out different types of applications and put more traffic and everything through them, a lot of those will be commerce experience, or have a commerce component to it. And if Shopify are providing that experience, and essentially you're going through the Shopify checkout or Shop Pay experience, that's obviously revenue to them, and you're not giving that market share to someone like Stripe, who are getting more prominent as a checkout based solution. I think the OpenAI Stripe partnership is pretty big, and I feel like the narrative around Shopify payments is changing a little bit. So to me, it feels like there's potentially an element of that to it, as well as just combining two very powerful tools, and Shopify helping them to get a foot into commerce, and them giving Shopify some net new demand.
What do Mattel, Victoria Beckham, Sennheiser, and Glossier all have in common? They power their businesses with Shopify. Shopify is the most innovative and scaled commerce platform on the planet. It also happens to have the best converting checkout on the planet. Shopify, powering the future of enterprise commerce. Find out more at shopify.com/enterprise.
And where do you see Sidekick fitting? Because obviously you've talked about this. You're talking about this element of AI as a play for them for strategic gain, less so about features. Obviously, it brings feature and functionality benefits for the merchants as well. But Sidekick feels to me more of a merchant-centric play rather than a Shopify strategic. Yes, obviously they can see and track what people are inquiring, which data objects are they most trying to execute commands and automations on. But fundamentally, it's a utility thing, because if you make the storefronts easier to manage and maintain and execute day-to-day tasks on, you increase satisfaction and you keep people built into that ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I think Sidekicks got pretty interesting all of a sudden. I think one thing more recently that I've noticed is that, I mean, basically, I think Sidekick will end up being a really useful resource for users. And I mean, you can already, get it building kind of pretty decent levels of insights into like what's happening from like a day-to-day trade perspective. And obviously it's got quite a lot of like automation within it. I think as they collect more data and use more data, I think, because I mean, it's quite interesting. So I've seen what Demo are building, and, a lot of the BI tools out there are building an equivalent. So like Demo use Claude, so do Polar. But I kind of watched, Demo's agent kind of go through a process of analyzing a period of kind of performance on a website, determine a load of insights, and then essentially go deeper and say, right, my Netherlands market is 50% down year on year. What's causing it? And then it's like inventory issue and email is not performing as well, and pay, and then it's giving all of this rationale around here's what you should do to reverse the trend. And I'm not saying it's got the same brain as like you do, or a really experienced ecom person does, but over time, as that develops more context and as it's trained, like realistically, the future, especially with the level of data that Demo have got, because they go pretty granular around like profitability and Omni and everything else, there's nothing stopping Demo from, starting to automate certain recommendations or fixes. And I feel like that's just one example of a very powerful kind of data and reporting tool. That if you think about any kind of tool like that houses that level of data and has loads of different brands, suddenly you're going to have this capability where, you've actually got a really good kind of, you can almost implement kind of a managed service, or you can start to implement the changes. And I feel like that's where Sidekick will go, because Shopify is sitting on so much data, and I think it will probably, as Shopify tend to do with a lot of the stuff that they roll out, I think it'll probably start quite SMB, and Sidekick will start saying stuff like 10 people have clicked this product, but it's not particularly prominent in this high traffic collection. Do you want to increase the visibility? Do you want to test doing this with a product? Do you want to, and I feel like Sidekick will probably go quite predictive, and then it'll start to get to a point where it's an interface to drive change.
Yeah, the other opportunity where they haven't gone yet is preset commands, like you get in AI chatbots, where you can like have macros for a customer to like, what's my order status or whatever, how do I, those things where they take you through a predefined journey. For me, the massive utility gain here would be having lots of standard ones that are commonly done by everybody. And there are ones like, for example, whether it's like look up a specific product, or I want to add a value to a meta object. There are lots of different bits where people do them all the time in a store, but you have to command it through a prompt rather than clicking on a pre-built macro. The other bit that for me is the better connectivity with some of the data objects, because it's still it's very impressive, but it's still pretty surface level. Like you can't integrate fully with things like a meta object to, if you want to like build out a meta object and add loads of different values into one that's existing to avoid having to do it manually or through an API, you can't yet do things like that. So for me, the direction of travel, take your point about the intelligence and helping people make smart decisions, but I think that utility of speeding up day-to-day tasks, which is almost like what used to be true web ops capabilities of people who are managing stores, I don't feel it's quite there yet, although it's far better than it was 12 months ago.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there'll be a lot of functionality sitting, but whether it's Sidekick or just built into core areas of the platform. But I think Shopify is probably already sitting on a lot. And I think they've probably, with the Atlas AI piece, I feel like maybe they've realized there's, certain data points missing that would be really valuable to some of that stuff. And also they're not able to then implement fixes where a third party is managing that. So that's kind of where I see that going. But I think, with Shopify and the level of data they've got across the board, like when you start to then build in things like the customer segments and like all of that stuff that they've kind of been optimizing over the last couple of years, it feels like there's probably quite a lot that they're going to be able to build into the agentic capability.
Yeah, and they basically said they're going to they're opening up more to like third party tools as well, so that you can create like connectivity between different systems to create automations. And I think one of the obvious ones is in Flow, the ability to through commands rather than through a more developer focused interface, create flows to achieve outcomes. Flow's an incredibly powerful tool. We'll come to that in a bit actually. But you've got to have a more technical mindset in order to use the flow capability and understand the different triggers and conditions. Whereas doing that through prompting and being able to then connect it through different third parties to execute, I think that will be so powerful.
Yeah, all of this is going to be so interesting because like I obviously ran a bit of a rabbit hole on those bits, but you factor flow into that as well. And I agree. Like some of our more technical clients are doing some amazing things with Flow that a lot of people are just going buying out of the box third party for. Yeah, it's definitely quite powerful.
Well, yeah, one of the projects I worked on recently, it was used as basically a custom middleware to execute code for products that were in bundles that had discounts. When the bundle was unpacked to its components, was creating discrepancies in rounding rules. It was causing an issue from a order file and finance point of view. And the flow was created to basically, in an order, before the order was sent through in the integration to ERP, unpack, do the calculations, work out the difference between the order total the customer paid and what the rounded values are, and create a rounding line difference to balance the order. The stuff you can do, I mean, it blew my mind, that. And the stuff you can do, it's not perfect. There were lots of challenges with it. And I know there's probably edge cases where it still doesn't work, but I guess the capability is there. I think when it's connected to flows, that will be, if it's ever connected to flows, but I would be surprised if that's not a future direction of travel on it.
Feels like it would just be kind of like a part of it, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. The bit that I always struggle with flows is not the capability. It's more knowing how to build it, because there are so many different permutations for how you build the conditions and the logic. And a lot of it requires you having to put specific code into it in order to execute commands. Next one is checkout extensibility. It's not new, but obviously they've increased capabilities this year. Shopify functions keeps extending to what you can do and execute in the checkout on top of Shopify's core checkout. What do you see the direction of travel? What do you see the potential going forwards on this?
So yeah, I mean, I feel like it will just continue to get more open. It's got a lot better. I recently failed an exam on this actually. So as part of our partnership with Shopify, we have to do a certain number of kind of certifications. I was doing one on our retreat in Spain, and I felt like I knew a lot about this actually, but I'm not as close to Shopify as I was. And then I did it without practicing and failed it by like 1 point, which is very annoying. But that I think reminded me of, how much has changed, and how, there's so many new little like classifications of things, and also just like how much work they're doing or have done in this area. But yeah, it feels like, you know, particularly now they're trying to do more like checkout as a service type things, or kind of facilitate the demand outside of just normal like web browsers. It feels like they'll continue to push this harder. And I also think, you know, as Shopify, things like the Lovable example, like I could see a world where there's a lot more kind of integrations that are direct to checkout.
Yeah, I think for me the future where merchants need to be is a standardized checkout, so that you're not constantly building custom. You've got the core functionality, performance, scalability, security, compliance, all that locked down, and you cannot break it by changing the code and screwing up core features. That's the critical bit, which is where SaaS self-hosted checkouts are absolute no-brainers. But they are the old view of that was really prescriptive and narrow, and it limited businesses where they needed to do custom things, and it could be custom payment flow. I mean, if you look at the advent of open banking, that's becoming more important to certain businesses who want to have open banking as a payment flow through the checkout. Can't do that in a lockdown one, can do that through extensibility. And that to me is where I guess where merchants need to see these checkouts as going, is you want to do something different for a particular use case, whether it's a customer group or in a particular country or whatever it might be. And that means you don't show a particular payment method to these people. That can be achieved without tinkering with the core checkout. And that's the critical thing. But the biggest challenge is for merchants to be really, really smart about what they do change and why, rather than trying to overcomplicate checkouts. Because I often find in conversation with people about what they want to achieve, there's lots of desires. Oh, we want to be able to like tailor this and show all the different messages. And actually, when you strip it back down, don't really need it. It's a lot of noise. But yeah, I'm definitely impressed with the checkout blocks app and functions. Already use that in a couple of projects, mainly around shipping logic and shipping rates and postcode exclusions. It was a bit of fun playing around with it, but I've definitely seen firsthand the benefits of that approach.
Yeah.
Let's go on to product data. I mean, this is more functional than strategic, but I know one of the limitations that's always been levied at Shopify has been around things like, you know, variant limits. There's still a lot of restrictions, in my opinion, because you can only have 3 variants per product. And for some businesses, there are configurable products that have maybe 4 or 5 or more variant options that impact price and SKU. And that's needed for many knock-on reasons, for processing orders, for product data feeds, you name it, even recent project for 3D visualization using a third-party tool of having that granular. But they've increased variant limits at least now so that you can create more variants. Where do you see them going on this? Because it feels like they take it. This is one area where they're taking a lot of time to catch up with what I would argue are product data leaders. Not saying the UI is perfect, but in terms of flexibility, the likes of Adobe Magento, where you really have great control over it. So better, but I feel like there's still a long way to go here to tick off most merchant use cases.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, there's workarounds in this area, and like we've had, as you say, like kind of build your own style product builders, or like, products with just 8 kind of variation options as part of a configuration process. And you can obviously do it and just call kind of, different products as part of that, or use a catalog API. But I just think it'll just continue to get more flexible. I think they have, the bigger thing, we obviously haven't talked about what's going on from an internal perspective with Shopify, and it's yet to be seen kind of how things potentially change since, after kind of Bobby and Rukmani left, and like, kind of what the biggest focuses are from a revenue perspective. But they have obviously been very, very focused on the enterprise. And I think there's probably a big correlation between kind of larger businesses that have more complexity around catalog. So it feels like they are kind of focusing in on this. I think this is the area that I've been most impressed with, actually. Like, I felt like over the last few years, markets would have moved faster, and obviously that's now in a better place. But catalog, I've been really impressed with how they've kind of improved kind of the handling of data and how they've improved kind of the structure, having worked with fairly big retailers 5-6 years ago where there were just workarounds on workarounds on workarounds. And I just think it will just get more and more open. That's kind of my view. I think they'll start to get to a point where they can allow for kind of more variation options. I think they'll start to kind of push more stuff into the API, etc. So I just feel like it'll just get more and more flexible, in my opinion.
I think the big shift that I've seen in the last few years is there are far fewer projects where a PIM is needed, generally, and often when a PIM is in, it's in because people historically think that's what you need when you have some complexities in like complex products, configurations, parent-child variants, when you have like translations, etc. But actually the core data model now, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people in the last couple of years about how you can use meta objects alongside meta fields to create structured data views and to house that data in a manageable way so that you don't need developers to keep maintaining it, but actually the business can update it and extend the meta object to add other values as the product data changes. As opposed to being locked into a data model in a PIM where you probably need developer support if the product data model evolves in econ to match it. That's the big shift, I think, that I've seen as a result of them building out this capability. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like, particularly for the international brands, it was probably the separate stores or the expansion stores that drove a lot of people buying, a lot of like brands buying PIMs over the last few years. And then now that's getting better, I feel like PIMs, as much as there's still value in a lot of areas, it's just that people just don't want a separate system to pay for or maintain. So they're willing to like forego certain bits of functionality. But I'd say we've definitely seen that same trend. And actually it's quite funny because I've been working with a couple of clients recently and they've said, we want to buy a PIM as part of this project. And my immediate thinking was like, why? But then you kind of remember that, all of these business, or a lot of these businesses have like other channels and like, a lot of misalignment amongst teams and a lot of issues with like PLM data getting lost and whatever else. I feel like maybe I'd kind of almost written them off a little bit, but I think again, that's where I start to get tunnel visioned in the fashion brand world, kind of more online orientated, etc.
Yeah, it's inevitable that we all get biased by the types of projects we work on. I think that is a slight inevitability in any platform ecosystem. I think for me, the bit where I really want to see the change is not being limited to 3 variant options per product, because that does create, yes, you can build workarounds and you can build configurators, but often the products are simple enough that you don't need a configurator. You just need additional levels of variant tiers so that you can achieve your product setup and you can achieve your pricing and your SKU structure and not have to create other customizations. That I would definitely want. And the other one that I think they massively benefit in here, although it's probably low level for a lot of retailers, is just that control of when you've set up a product with variants. In some collections, PLPs, you just want the parent shown, whereas in others, you want all your options showing. And the ability to do that without having to create customizations in code would be really, really useful just as a configurable setting. So I think they've done really, really, I agree with you. I think it's shifted on really well. And it's a really deep data model. There's a few things where if they could do that in the next 6-12 months, it would help merchants massively.
That's a good point. What you raised there. I think that's probably an area where, because we would still very often want to separate out products for the color, So just because, there's so many areas of merchandising where you benefit from having those split out. And I agree. I think it probably just needs to go a little bit further before that's kind of fully manageable, as you say, at like collection level, or being able to manage it for search or rec specifically or something. But I think they're improving massively and quickly.
Next one is omnichannel. And I guess what's your how serious do you think they are about creating a true enterprise omni-channel experience, given the fact that you've got Shopify, you've got Shopify POS. A lot of enterprise retailers historically have their own POS hardware and systems, and those can be quite complex and quite customized. POS has evolved significantly. The ability to have custom views and different apps on different locations to suit different stores. Different users, when they logged in, to have different views to suit their role within the store. I think that's fantastic, and the UI is really easy. But it's still probably a little bit behind the true dedicated POSes and just how much flexibility and how custom you can go in terms of capability. Where are you seeing them at the moment, and where do you see that direction of travel?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always felt like this is one of their biggest opportunities. They've got like so much low-hanging fruit from a revenue perspective, because any of their like kind of mid-market brands, or a lot of them, will have 20 plus stores, and they won't want to use POS. And it's usually just because there's certain limitations, and historically there's been a lot of issues around things like stock. I will say we're working on a POS project at the moment, and we're not experts around point of sale. We've done quite a lot with Shopify for very simple brands, but we're not experts, and we've been working with Cubics, who I think, did we have them on the podcast at one point?
Who's that, sorry?
Cubics, the agency, so they work really closely with POS. So we've got a client, they've been doing a really complex POS implementation project, and everyone said they've been amazing, so we should definitely get them on to do a podcast specifically on Shopify POS, because this project has a lot of customization, and they are essentially moving from something very heavily customized to Shopify. But overall, I think some people are now willing to compromise because of the value of having all your data in one place and being able to quickly roll out, Omni loyalty programs and do push notifications based on, retail data and whatever else. But I think that I'm just surprised that they've not prioritized it more, because the next point is B2B, which I don't really know much about. But it feels like they put a lot of work into B2B, and I'm sure like the big picture opportunity is massive. But to me, retail, it just feels like they've never really put that much behind it, both from like a product and kind of sales and marketing perspective. And the other thing I'd say is also it can be pretty expensive. And I think if they got that whole thing right, and they've definitely improved the underlying architecture with like the apps now, and they're doing more to try and make the order management side better. But I feel like that could be just it already is amazing for like so many small businesses. Like I'm a massive fan of doing it and having everything in one place, but I think they could just put a bit more behind it and very quickly go and like clean up like shed loads of revenue for the brands that have got, well over 100 stores. If they just kind of put a little bit more behind it.
Yeah, I think if I'm looking at it from a strategic point of view, the times when people have gone for POS is when I know this is just my experience, and there's wider industry will have different use cases, but it's been where they don't have many stores, and therefore they don't have a huge legacy estate of hardware to replace. And the cost model is easier to sign off on for the omnichannel benefits of having unified customer accounts, the ability to push draft orders to store or vice versa without having to create any integrations, because the payments and orders are happening in different systems, which is challenging as hell. And especially for things like refunds, if you want to refund online orders in store, but you've got different POS to different e-com, how the hell you do that because of payments and tokenization? That's complex. But when you get to bigger store estates, 50 stores, 100 stores, the cost of hardware, there feels like there's a missing trick here in terms of the cost proposition of understanding that the rates on Shopify POS can be higher than other POS systems, but there's no offset for people. There's no incentive. Yes, there are some benefits of alignment, but if from a CFO's point of view, if you're adding 100 grand's worth of cost suddenly to a business, that often changes the dynamic in considering it and getting a sign off internally. So I think definitely the cost model bit is something where some I guess evolution of thinking might be useful.
Yeah.
Let's do a final quick one on B2B before we cut this short. I guess where my head's at is, I've read lots of different posts out there about Shopify and B2B and where it sits and where it's a market leader or where it's not. And my view has always been it's had good solid wholesale, but it's never been a market leader. I think what I would have considered my objections to be a market leader in terms of functionality, flexibility and customization for different customer accounts, inside the account structures, they're gradually pulling the barriers away. They're still not 100% there against pure enterprise B2B or dedicated B2B platforms. But they've definitely, I mean, the bits, I guess what I've seen, and like you alluded to earlier, they've been genuinely focused here. Last couple of years in each edition, we've seen meaningful functionality, which, and that's why in my rambling head, the strategic perspective on this is, whereas a couple of years ago, I would have said to people, if B2B is your driving point for decision and platform, Shopify is significantly behind. And I couldn't tell you that's the right one to back yet, because I don't know how quickly they're going to accelerate. Fast forward 2 years, and I'd say that I'm seeing the direction of travel being really positive, and therefore that gives greater confidence that, in another 12 to 24 months, those gaps are going to be eroded even further.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, you've got more experience than I have with B2B. I think I've used it with some clients that have more of a kind of fairly basic trade kind of portal, or as you say, kind of some level of wholesale. And I've found it really nice and easy to use. But I feel like every time I've been exposed to people trying to push it really hard for B2B, there's always been compromise. And I think you would know more than I would around kind of where it's not particularly strong. I think the really interesting thing that we kind of touched on a little bit around in this episode that will probably become clearer soon is like there's been so many leadership changes at Shopify, or like some pretty significant leadership changes at Shopify recently at a time where they're performing really well. It'll just be interesting to see what some of that change, the new COO, CRO leaving, means to their overall direction. And because I think enterprise and B2B are probably two segments that have had so much attention. And obviously, we don't really know to what extent that's worked compared to how they thought it might work, or has, returned the right level of return, etc. But it'll be interesting to see with everything that's happening in the world, kind of what the strategy looks like now around B2B and enterprise and product in general.
Yeah, I think my summary is that I've got greater confidence that they will close the gap, or enough to satisfy a lot of core use cases for B2B, where it is predominantly a retail D2C business, but with a strong B2B capability rather than the deep. I'm not talking about like pure complex B2B like manufacturing, etc. I wouldn't be speaking about those now, but anyway, that's our kind of summary, strategic view, state of Shopify, what it means, where it's headed. There are lots of different discussion points we could add. If you disagree with anything, or you've got different viewpoints, or you've got anything to add, please do reach out, comment on the post on LinkedIn. Let us know. We'd love to hear, because there's always different interpretations of what people are doing. But thanks as always for listening.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast, hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-commerce strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.